we're living examples, sort of literally metaphorically, of how good our biology can recycle things. Because if we were using virgin material every time to produce all the cells that we go through every day, we would never stop eating.
Thank you for watching this video. Please help us keep the show alive by liking and sharing this video, and by subscribing to the show and making sure the notification button is switched on. For those of you who can help a little bit more, there's a Patreon link down below where you can contribute whatever you can. Every little does help, and all the money will go directly back into the show. You can also keep up with our latest content on Instagram at The No Show Pod, as you can see on the screen. As you know, The No Show is an initiative designed to make academic research accessible to everyone. So do contribute to the conversation, leave some questions, have a discussion, and I'll make sure I get back to everyone. So Alex, thank you so much for joining me on The No Show. I'm really pleased to have you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So
yeah, it's really. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really a pleasure to be here and chat about things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things for me about your profile and the work that you do is that obviously you're a chemist and you're in the chemistry department at King's, and we've discussed before the recording of the podcast sort of two strands of your research that tackle incredibly large problems, but sort of have a very similar basis. So as I understand, one of the strands is sort of looking at biofuels. Another is sort of how stabilizing proteins that are involved in the sort of transport of vaccines. And so talk to me about how you found yourself studying such big problems. What was the route for you to sort of get in here?
Yeah, so I mean, throughout my PhD, I was working on sort of just looking at protein-based materials, and just what can we do with these things. So the group I was working in was very much focused on using biological constructs to build other materials. So in a process predominantly called biomineralization. So they're looking at, well, there's a lot of different biological entities out there, and we can use that to build really interesting materials that have these kind of weird architectures that either make them stronger, make them more absorbent, this, that, and the other. And for me, I was really looking at how we can use, instead of using the biology to direct, say, more traditional, not hard materials, something like minerals, can we use the biology itself as the building block for material? And so naturally, this is going to be a bit more of a soft material. And so we kind of made what we call the solvent-free liquid proteins, which was basically a fluid of protein, which is unusual in itself because for various other phenomena that the size of a protein means that you can't really form a liquid from it for various physical reasons. And so we were really interested to see whether we can at first just form a material where the protein is the core constituent, but has different properties to how biology would use it otherwise. And then from there, we then discovered that these proteins were really thermally stable once we'd made them into this material. But not only that, but we could also show that they had biological function in the absence of any water. So this is kind of really interesting stuff that it was really exciting to do, because we were kind of seeing how a lot of the work before using biology was always very concerned with sort of making sure there's water around. And so as we're all aware, we're water-based beings. We're 70% water ourselves, and biology is thought as being requiring this water to do its job. And then what we were showing actually was then through this material development that actually I think biology was a little bit more robust than people would give it credit for, and actually we can use the building blocks of biology, so proteins and enzymes, in the absence of any water, and it still does its job. And so this was kind of really interesting. And so then I then wanted to kind of take this beyond this fairly kind of esoteric blue sky kind of research and kind of think about, well, actually, what can we do with this? What can we do with these materials to to actually have some sort of application at the end of it. And so naturally, the first one was to think about, well, we know we can make enzymes work in the absence of water, and a lot of industrial sort of processes, especially when it comes to commodities like fuels and plastics and the chemicals that we use in everyday life, uh, often have absolutely zero compatibility with water. But the thing is with nature is that there's all of these reactions that can happen, and we use all of these reactions in our everyday industry, but we just don't use biology, even though biology has evolved to be significantly better at it than we have. And there's a really good quote from Frances Arnold, who won the Nobel Prize recently in chemistry, and she was saying that biology is the best chemical engineer she's ever met. And so in this respect, I'm paraphrasing, that wasn't actually the quote, but she said words to that effect. And she's right. There are biology has a whole suite of tools for us, and so I really wanted to harness this kind of untapped potential of biology to actually help us make these fuels, these chemicals, and these plastics that we require in the modern world that we wouldn't be able to live without these days in a much more sustainable manner. And this really sort of requires us to kind of take it out of water, unless we completely revamp everything. But I mean, as I was saying, a lot of the products we need are just completely incompatible with water, and actually producing them on scale, if you have water present, it really it ruins a lot of these reactions. And so we really think about, if we can, so showing that we can have these enzymes work outside of water meant that we could really work towards actually making our industries more sustainable. And so the natural place to start with that for us was to demonstrate that actually sticking maybe on the bio side is, can we make biofuels, or at least try making at least one part of the biofuel production process a lot more kind of easier and more sustainable than what we have currently.
So why is it that biology isn't traditionally used in industry in the way that you've described?
So I mean, there have been, there's a lot of work has been done on trying to use enzymes, particularly, and use biology for these purposes. But a lot of the focus has been on trying to include water, basically. So a lot of the focus has been on ensuring that the process is amenable to the enzyme. And for the the caveats I've just gone through, this means that we're not seeing it as much, because a lot of the focus has been trying to make the industrial process better for biology, whereas I'm approaching it from the other side, and I want to see, can we make the biology better for the industrial process. I guess the jury is still out on whether that's actually the correct way to go. And there's been a lot of good work done on making sort of trying to meet in the middle somewhere on developing enzymes that do reactions. But for my money, I really want to move away from the the fine chemicals, the drug molecules that a lot of people are using enzymes for, which they're invaluable, because you can get away from because you can get away with having really high costs associated with this, having to build an industry around this process. Whereas if you want to start thinking about the more commodity chemicals like fuels and plastics, or even recycling systems as well, then really we're going to have a bit more of a easier way of doing that. And I guess it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but we do have a whole industry set up already, and so we can slot in a more sustainable way of doing it into the existing industry, then it's going to be more likely that it's going to be taken up.
So are you saying if we do
That's what I
that,
can think of.
if are you saying that if we do that, then we would be driving down costs, or are you saying the costs will continue to be the same?
So there's two things there. So like the one of the biggest reasons why, so plastics is a really good example of this. we recycle so little of plastics, and I can't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but it's around about 80% of all plastics is virgin material. So it comes from petrochemicals, and and I think the amount that we recycle is like I think it's less than 20% even. It might even be, maybe it's 88%. I forget now. I forget what the number is, but it's very, when you see something that's been recycled plastic, that's a rarity. We
Mm,
rarely, we don't really use uh, the plastics again, and that's because of the cost. It's still cheaper for if for a company who wants to make a plastic bottle, for example, it's far cheaper for them to make it from scratch than to make it from a recycled product.
mhm,
And so it's the cost of making the recycled product and making the recycled product better as well. As a lot of the problem is sort of that not only is it a more expensive feedstock to produce new plastics, it's also the current strategy of recycling plastics creates material which isn't anywhere near as good. So, when you can see it from a kind of almost from the economic side of things, that, well, the company's going to say, well, why would we take the recycled product when it's going to cost us more and it gives us a worse product? So there's that bit there where we need to think. I mean, I'm using plastics as an example for that, but it's a fairly good example when it's fairly kind of like, it's an important problem that we have. But like, being able to create recycled material which is cost effective and of good quality, and that's where I think biology can really kind of come into it, because that's what biology does. It recycles things all the time. You know, we're living examples, sort of literally metaphorically, of how good our biology can recycle things. Because if we were using virgin material every time to produce all the cells that we go through every day, we would never stop eating. And so
mm.
we're very good at doing that kind of recycling system.
So where are we right now in on the sort of time scale of let's say you know zero of us having no sort of biology in industry, and T to having industry purely biology and sustainable. Where are we now? Are we still very early on, or have there been moves to sort of make industry a lot more sustainable?
Yes, there have been moves. As I was saying, there are a few aspects of industry, so especially on the the pharmaceutical side of things, and these what we call the high value products. There's a shift to using biology for those things, simply because it does the job way better than anything we've ever made um, otherwise. And so there's a clear need for the use of biology in those ones. But it's still not. I don't actually know the numbers off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you that. I wish I could tell you what the market size of it was, but I know it's not. It's certainly it's a small fraction of the current industry, but we are moving into there, and more industries are wanting to use biology to help there. Especially a lot of industries are very much aware of their environmental impact and are desperately trying to kind of reduce that. And so I wish I could give you a time frame. But I think we're getting close to the point where actually, so a lot of industries will try to do it, at least
Mm.
more so than they are.
The I mean, there's so many interesting things that I want to explore. Particularly the plastic aspect, because I mean, the data is scary. If we're recycling, like 12%, um, or 12% of the plastic that's produced is recyclable, and however much of that is recycled. What I mean, from the research that you've done, are there sort of any signs that biology can really play a leading role in sort of in the recycling process of plastics?
Yeah, so we're starting to see some really exciting sort of developments in discovery. There's a lot has been discovery on enzymes that have shown to be active against these plastics. And the benefit, our traditional way of recycling plastics has been effectively to melt it down and then recast it. the way that if we use biology, and what we're hoping to see is instead of just taking the bulk plastic, melting it down, recasting it, melting it, and we get wear and tear, what we can do with biology is break the plastic down to its constituent bits, so then we can perform the chemistry again on the to make the plastic as if it was virgin material. And that's where the benefit really is going to be with biology, is that ability to strip it back to its starting point, as opposed to just kind of making a worse and a worse and worse material every time you recycle it. And yeah, saying we're seeing you know, a lot of good work on at least the biological side of finding these enzymes that do this job, and then I'm hoping to then take those enzymes and make them even better by using them in these non-aqueous environments that we work with.
What sparked your interest in chemistry?
Sparked my interest. Well, that's a very sort of more loaded question by a lot of things. I like with many people and many scientists, it was something that I was really just quite good at school, and so then I took it on to university. And so I think for me, what sparked my interest in maybe more material sciences, which is where I started off, was really in this, thinking about how we can make new materials. You never really think about especially when you're growing up, about things that are made, and when you think about the plastics are plastics, the wood is wood, and those kinds of things. They're just things that exist. But then I was kind of really intrigued at this. When we're thinking about, especially in this group that I was in, was when you're thinking about using biology to really fine tune the material properties of various minerals or whatever. It was really fascinating to have that situation where we can have a lot more control over our materials, and actually it kind of opened my eyes to like this world of where we're of building new materials for for various different purposes, and that actually it's not a finished thing. Again, you often think about, well, that's the best plastic we can have, but or whatever, but there's so much more things to do in that field. And especially using particularly we use biology as inspiration as well. And yeah, I think it was that kind of the fact that there's still a lot of design, and there's still a lot of discovery in controlling our the world that we live in, which I think was really kind of exciting in that respect. So that's kind of, so yeah, so I guess I was good at school, but then what really excited me was how you can apply. So I'm very driven by the application of science, and so I guess I sit at the interface of science and engineering, I think, is often what I say. And so where I am really interested by the nuts and bolts of the science, but really quite excited by these future applications.
That's really interesting. I think one of the things that stood out to me when we were talking before is sort of the idea that you guys are sort of looking at mushrooms and seeing how the process inside mushrooms work, and trying to find the bottleneck, and essentially, I mean, I don't know how much of that is purely biomimicry, if you're just trying to mimic what happens in a mushroom and just make it more efficient. But what sort of how did that project come about? Essentially, where you look at a mushroom of all things.
So, I can't take claim for looking at the mushroom. So that's been done a long time before. So so I couldn't tell you when, but I guess at some point someone realized that these mushrooms have these trio of enzymes. So the cellulose enzymes, as they call them, which the mushroom uses, and so they will use it so you can extract those enzymes, and then you can figure out how they're made, and you can make them yourself. And then so I guess you can buy these commercially now as well. So we call it the cocktail of cellulase enzymes, which breaks down biomass into sugars. And I guess that's kind of where it kind of stopped in many respects, where people were like, well, we've learned from biology, we found how it does it, these three enzymes, and now we're using it, but it wasn't very efficient, basically, and so that's where we started thinking about well, how can we make it more efficient?
And then obviously in making it more efficient, obviously there loads of opportunities arise. And so the opportunities in this case is biofuels, right?
Yeah, and so this is just kind of one aspect of it really. So, you know, Brazil is a really good example of what we call the first generation biofuels. So they have a lot of cane sugar, which they can grow in Brazil, and so a lot of their fuel is based on ethanol, which you can directly ferment, and not too dissimilar to how you brew beer, or how you make whiskeys or whatever. That kind of process can be used to make fuels from sugar. But yeah, that's directly from sugar. And so we're thinking, in this country, we can't really, for example, we can't really grow cane sugar all that well, if at all, at least on the scale that we would need it. But we can grow what we call woody biomass. And so this is these polymers, which are the most abundant polymers on the planet, grows all over. And so we can, and that contains the sugar units. It's just locked up in the wood or whatever you want to, the biomass. And so extracting it there would allow us to create biofuels in that respect on a from a much more broader sort of feedstock, as it were, which more countries will be able to then use. And so you wouldn't have to then transport it across the world. So for example, if we wanted to have the so-called first generation biofuels by using sugar, we'd have to import a whole ton of sugar from other countries, which then comes at all of the carbon cost of importing it. And so there's no benefit to that. But if we can use things that we can grow locally, or even waste, and so that's the thing, we have a lot of woody waste, especially in Europe, that is just, it's lying there waiting for us to use it for something. When wood becomes structurally unstable to build things with, it just becomes waste, and it just slowly rots away. But if we can use that for something, and particularly if we can convert it to biofuels, then we've got our way of making things.
Are you excited by all the opportunities that you see in front of you in terms of how industries can change, how fuel can change, how generally how we can essentially redesign just life?
Yeah, I mean, we've got there's a huge range of possibilities that we can go down, and as you're saying, like, making everything more sustainable would be such a better way for us to live. And I really see, a lot of people's perceptions as well, I feel, are, when we talk about sustainability, they might think of hippies in the 60s and like weaving things from hemp and stuff. But actually, it doesn't have to be that. I mean, it could be that. I mean, actually, there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, in terms of, but if you think of the phone, and most of the modern world is reliant on these are what we call the advanced materials, so these really high performance plastics. And so making that more sustainable, it has got to be the route that we go down, I think, because at the end of the day, we're going to run out of the raw material eventually. And so, yeah, the sooner the better, and it'll help our ability to reduce our impact on the environment as well.
One of the areas that is really sort of got a lot of attention in recent times by everyone, because it was forced on us, was sort of the vaccines, the COVID vaccine. And obviously, all these stories about it has to be stored at this kind of temperature, and transportation is going to be a headache, and there's so many bottlenecks to getting vaccines produced and delivered.
Yeah.
This is exciting stuff for you guys to look at, because you mentioned that you can, in the processes that you guys are working on, can really help democratize vaccines and the distribution of vaccines.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of what we're thinking about. So if we think about the delivery of vaccines, and it's not even just in sort of the more developing world, but actually anywhere which doesn't have a link to a big hospital, right? I mean, we're seeing it even in the UK. A lot of the rural clinics don't have these -70 freezers, and so they can't store the vaccine, so they're going to have to rely on the fact that it comes on dry ice, etc. And so if we can remove those barriers to to storage and delivery, it will make everything better. And so, like the cost of a vaccination program in sort of, to use the very technical phrase, in a resource limited environment, it can be as great as 80%. And so imagine if we can cut the cost of delivering therapeutics to places that don't otherwise get them. That reduction in cost will really help things to go along and really kind of help a much broader range of communities than we can possibly do at the moment.
With obviously the pandemic, has that sped up the investment and the interest in the kind of research that you're doing?
Loaded question. So yes and no. So there's certainly interest, but the speed at which we kind of need to deliver deliver the vaccines, as we've seen this extraordinary effort to, where we've dovetailed, unlike previous times where we've waited, we've gone, okay, do the tests, wait, do another test, wait. We've really dovetailed the process in going from an idea of the vaccine to delivering it, which has been absolutely amazing to see. But then you've got to work on what and so there's been some reluctance to try anything new because you wouldn't be able to do it fast enough. So we've shown that we've got a proof of concept, right? But we haven't shown its bioavailability, for example. Like, we know it's stable, but the components we use might not be the best, and so and there is an optimization left to do, which is exciting stuff. So I think maybe once things have calmed down, and then because there would have been a lot of money spent, let's put it that way, on getting these vaccines out, and so if we can make at least part of that more sustainable in the future, so now this is sustainable in terms of actually being able to do things for a longer term, then I think we'll start getting to work on it. But at the moment, because of the speed required to deliver the current vaccines, as I was saying, there's not a huge take up on trying something brand new. Actually, because one of the reasons is we're already trying a new type of vaccine. So these RNA, these DNA vaccines that we're seeing being deployed at the moment are new enough as it is. I think it'll be a hard sell to say, all right, we're going to use not only a new type of vaccine, but we're going to have a new delivery system altogether. And I think, so as I say, yes and no. People are interested, but
it sounds like a bit of a catch-22 though, because at a time where there's so much like public attention to something like this, and there's so much money being pumped into it, you'd think that investments would go into the future of vaccines in general. But essentially, what it seems like is that everyone still has to be very, very sort of risk averse and not try too many new things.
Yeah, I mean, this is what this is the thing, right? Risk averse is definitely the thing, but to be honest, I'm pretty happy that they're being pretty risk adverse, because if we want to beat these problems, it's sort of like I'm willing to take the hit on my own research, and the way, even though I think it's an important step forward, it's not tested. I mean, I don't know if I would trust myself to to produce these things just yet, because we've simply not tested it. And so I do see the benefit in, definitely, at least at the moment, in using tried and tested methodologies. But moving forward, I think that there'll be very much a call to start actually thinking, all right, well, delivering all these vaccines at minus 70 degrees was a bit much. So let's see what we can do about it.
Where are you sort of planning to build on your research from here?
So the ongoing things is, as I said, we're really kind of investigating this plastic recycling, sort of trying to improve that and moving towards more kind of applicable systems for the vaccine stabilization. So as I said, we've done the proof of concept. It would be nice to move towards actually relevant systems, relevant targets, and for actual vaccines or therapeutic stabilization. And then, as I was saying, a lot of the focus of the research in my group currently is how we can improve this, how we can better sell the use of biology in industry, make it, saying reducing the cost of using it. So one of the things we're looking at is, one of a real big cost is how can we replicate the cellular machinery. So there's, a lot of the enzymes in biology require a whole extra level of recycling of the various components it needs. So if you want to perform certain reactions, you need 3 or 4 other different chemicals, which the body can, as I said earlier, the body can recycle and use them very effectively. If we want to do it on an industrial scale, it becomes really expensive. And so we're investigating, if we can think outside of the box in terms of using biology outside of water, well, what else can we do? So we're thinking about some new ways of recycling these expensive cofactors that biology use, and that would really drive down the cost of implementing biology in industrial settings. So those are the things that we're really focusing on at the moment.
Where can people sort of reach out to you or find you online, engage with your research?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm relatively active. Well, I want to be more active, so if people want to reach out to me, so you can find me on Twitter. That's at APS Brogan, Twitter. That's the most public facing way, I guess. I'm there. Otherwise, you can contact me on emails and stuff. That's the main other way. But it's always good to have these things out in the open. So Twitter is a really good place, I think, for those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anyone listening and is interested in this stuff, definitely follow Alex's work and follow him on Twitter. And it's definitely something that we encourage always to get people to engage with academics, and whether they're in the field or whether they're just interested in the field. Is creating this sort of organic collaboration between people and researchers, like the public in general and researchers, is something that I think contributes significantly to the impact of individual research. And so fingers crossed we can encourage that.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, I'm funded by the public. I feel like it's my duty to give it back, basically. So the more I can engage with the public, the better, really.
Absolutely. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And
yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, excellent. And I would love to sort of have you on sometime soon and sort of talk about more developments of your work.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you for watching this video. Please help us keep the show alive by liking and sharing this video, and by subscribing to the show and making sure the notification button is switched on. For those of you who can help a little bit more, there's a Patreon link down below where you can contribute whatever you can. Every little does help, and all the money will go directly back into the show. You can also keep up with our latest content on Instagram at The No Show Pod, as you can see on the screen. As you know, The No Show is an initiative designed to make academic research accessible to everyone. So do contribute to the conversation, leave some questions, have a discussion, and I'll make sure I get back to everyone.